Hi there. You're watching Grumpy Opinions. Outlander is the fantasy show on Starz TV, all set in the 18th century, following the Fraser family who live on Fraser's Ridge in North Carolina, who are a bunch of time travellers and Scottish expatriates. Episode 6, The World Turns Upside Down, finds us all back on the ridge, where Roger Mack's holding court as the church priesty man type, now well familiar with the role, and everyone's kinda happy with him, and he's so into his flock that he realises that a few familiar faces haven't turned up. So, the lassies of the Fraser crew traipse out to check on them, only to find out their cabin's completely surrounded by crows and it's all dark and dingy, but luckily, Claire's managed to learn how the curtains work since season 4, and they find the family all dead or dying of the bloody flux.
Ooh, nasty.
Yep, it turns out there's a nasty tummy bug on the ridge, a form of amoebic dysentery that's doing for everybody, or well, doing for a hell of a lot of people at least. Not only that, Claire ends up getting struck down and she's all sorts of in a bad way. Meanwhile, Jamie and Bree fret over her while Malva won't even leave her side. So everyone's really worried. And when she finally comes to, it turns out that when she was under, somebody came in and chopped off all her girly locks, but otherwise she's fine. So Claire, being Claire, decides she knows best and goes off to visit Tom because apparently he was in a bad way as well. But he's doing a bit better, and he's kind of shocked to see her, but he's generally okay, and that's up until she asks for a stool sample, and he's like, "Heathen!" Anyway, James kind of peeved that she was out and about, but, you know, it's only because he's worried and he loves her, and, you know, they're very lovey-dovey, just as usual, and that's good, because he's about to take a trip off for a couple of weeks with Roger and go off to some kind of seditious anti-British seminar or something or other. But just before they leave, the Christies all pop up, looking dour and grim and pissed off, and Malva's looking right guilty about something, which Ian ends up looking a little bit concerned about. Oh aye. And sure enough, turns out she's up the duff, but she won't say who the dad is to anybody except Jamie because dun dun dun!
It was him.
So she said, and that's while Claire was out of it and he got drunk and they ended up going at it one night. And then a whole bunch of times apparently.
The man in question had it 12 times or more.
Wow. And Claire goes full Will Smith on Malva, and then Jamie slaps Alan about for coming at him with a really weak punch, and then Tom's just like, "Anyway, so shall we talk about maintenance then?" Yeah, good luck with that. And Jim ends up throwing them all out and then goes to find Claire to talk it out with her. And she's like, "Well, did you?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "Ever?" And he goes, "Well, there was one time in a cave when you were back in the future." And she's like, "Ah, that's fine then, never worry about that." So everything's fine, and Claire even tries to make peace with Malva and find out who the real dad is. But unfortunately, just at the moment she looks like she's about to say something, Alan pops out and tells Claire to piss off. And off she pisses. And now nobody likes them anymore because reasons, and Claire starts having stress and hallucinating the old dead brown guy in full apparition format. And so when she ends up seeing Malva marching over from the stable, she's like, "Oh, sorry," and gets ethered well out of her face. Only Malva ends up waking her up and gives her a load of sass, so Claire's like, "I got you!" And then when she wakes up, oh, it was all a dream, I suppose, and goes out to garden something, only to find out, nope, Malva is properly dead, throat slit ear to ear. And Claire tries her best to get the baby out and resuscitate it, but it's long gone, and she can only sob, because this looks pretty damning for her, no matter which way you swing it. So what did I think? Well, this was a pretty eventful episode, not only in terms of things happening, but also in terms of the passage of time, because this episode screamed right by something like about 2, 3, maybe even 4 months worth of actual real-life time, courtesy of 2 large time skips during the episode. And it also did have 2 full plot lines that both played out during the episode, first of which was the Bloody Flux storyline, which took out half the ridge, and then there was a whole situation with Malva's pregnancy. And one thing I noticed about the episode was that it actually started out with Malva holding a dead baby, or pretty near the beginning, you know, when they were in the sick house, and then the episode ended with her dead and Claire holding her dead baby. That's a bold choice, and I kind of like that kind of thematic echoing of things, you know, it's like...
Again, it's like poetry, sort of, they rhyme.
And I also really like the way that they did the scenes of Jamie and Roger coming home and telling their wives about the trips away. I mean, that was really nicely done. I like the way they intercut that, and also I feel like the story is giving a little bit of weight to the younger couple in a way that it hasn't done as much previously. Similarly, like the wee scene of Bree talking about Frank spit on the side and Roger reassuring her. You know, it's not a scene that actually advances anything in the story, it's all about character, and it was nicely observed. And it was good when they did that, because there was a couple of points in this episode where it felt like some scenes could have used a different scene in between. But also, shout-outs to the performances of both Katrina Balfe and Jessica Reynolds this week. Now, Katrina Balfe's always been one that I've enjoyed during the show. I mean, at times she has her moments of being a little bit stilted, especially, you know, during voiceovers, and this episode was no different in that regard. Also in the dysentery house at the beginning, she was, you know, a little bit robotic. But anyway, the rest of the episode was really good because she does the emotional stuff brilliantly. I mean, you have to have a heart of stone not to be moved by the scene where she's trying to, like, you know, do a cesarean on dead Malva and then resuscitate the baby. And that's I think that's proper technique, the whole sort of puff your cheeks out and then like 2-finger heartbeat tap. That's actually how you're supposed to resuscitate a baby. People should know that. But also, they actually let her look legitimately terrible after she woke up from being ill. I mean, props to the actress for, in a world of celebrities having to look perfect all the time, she let herself really look like a dying homeless lady in this thing. And, good job to all involved, to Katrina Balfe, who's a very beautiful woman, to the hair makeup team, the lights, the camera, all the people who made this look the way it did. Also, Jessica Reynolds, who hasn't really been in anything else that I've seen, and I've not really mentioned her that much before, but yeah, she's finally getting a chance to really shine and really show some acting chops this week. Shame it was just before they killed her off, but yeah, okay, anyway, she got to do angry, she got to do hurt, pleading sad, and she also got to do absolute psycho, and I really like this sort of first-person nightmare sequence, especially the fact that she literally never blinks once during the whole scene. It's really creepy. And she's also got that whole, wee girl with huge eyes thing going on that you tend to find girls who are about 5 foot or smaller tend to have. But yeah, well, they all kind of look like that PlayStation advert for back in the 90s.
Let me tell you what bugs me about human endeavour. I've never been the human in question. Have you?
And I would actually say it's a pity that she's gone. It's a shame. I was wondering what they were going to do with these characters, but it's actually opened up the story for some new direction. But I'm going to get into that bit later on, after I talk about some of the things I was less happy with. Okay, so straight out the gate, I'd like to mention a couple of wee nitpicks. First of which was, why is the wifey in the church making a face? I mean, that's a choice, but maybe they thought they'd cut or something, or maybe she was reacting to a different line than the one we actually heard in the episode, but yeah, it just looked really bizarre to me. Anyway, mugging at the camera, you do you, hen. Also, I really laughed at this coffins moment, which I don't think was intentional, but it might just be me, but it really reminded me of that scene from Interview with the Vampire, when Lestat and his daughter are like having this chat with his family, and then he says, play a sad song, and she plays a sad song, and the camera pans away, and you see like all the coffins being taken at the building, because clearly they've all been murdered by the vampires. Anyway, also, when they were trying to cool down Claire later on, like they're putting the damp cloth on her head, right, she's still wearing like inch-thick wool, so maybe take off the big wool jacket she has on because it looks boiling. Also, speaking of that jacket, Claire's supposed to be skinny as heck post-illness, but you can see clearly later on that Katrina Balfe is actually pregnant. I mean, it's not a biggie because Katrina Balfe was pregnant when they filmed it. It's just amusing to notice this because the amount of times that she's clearly got clothes on that try and obscure and disguise the shape of her body below her waist. And it's not a big thing, and you make do. Actresses will get pregnant, that will happen in life. But I'm just saying I noticed it, there you go. Also, I know this might be anathema to some folks, but when the episode tries to kid on that Claire's gonna die, and look, she's not going to. Like, I've not even read the books, and I know she's not going to. I mean, this is like little better than last season where they tried to kid on that Jamie was gonna get his leg, come off, or he was gonna die after he got bit by a snake. Now, I didn't buy it then, I don't buy it now, because, I mean, if you believe that that's actually gonna happen on the show, have you been watching this show for the last 6 seasons? Or did you just start yesterday? Because I'm past the point where I believe for even a split second that the show has any intention of ever killing Claire or Jamie. It's not going to happen. Or at least, if it won't happen until like season 10 or something. So Claire being ill, sure, that's fine. Everyone moping around for 10 minutes an episode kind of just feels like wasting time to me because I'm not actually concerned she's going to die. And the thing with Outlander is, it will 100% put the characters through, like, sexual or psychological trauma, and even, like, obviously some physical trauma, but they're not going to kill the main protagonist because it's really not that kind of show. If it was, we would have shed more than a couple of these folks along the line. I mean, let's be honest, who have we really lost out of the main characters? Murtaugh. That was literally it. Anyway, also, her hair, I couldn't care less about her hair. Sorry. Don't care. It shouldn't be a big plot point. I also feel like some of the events of this week would have been better if they'd actually been interspersed with other events of previous episodes, and I do wonder if, again, this is the showrunners moving plot lines to specific episodes and separating them, whether they're spread out in the books, because they might be worried that the audience might not be able to follow more than one running event at a time, which is a bit weird because, as I've said, this is all very soap opera-esque, and soap operas usually have like 30 characters, all of whom have different storylines going on at once, and people don't have a problem with that. And because this season really has been kind of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, and I think that they shouldn't worry about actually stretching some of these storylines throughout seasons a bit more. But I also felt that the whole dysentery plotline was a bit of a time waste on this, partly because we've already done a similar plotline in season 3 when they were on the ship, but also then most of it was skipped over. I mean, they just literally just went, okay, cool, but what has to come out of this? Claire has to get ill. So they just went straight to that, which makes me wonder if Also, some of the time jumps in this episode is because they've actually cut other plot lines out. I mean, a few folk have dropped in the comments about how this plotline or that plotline hasn't appeared or has been cut out or maybe, isn't going to appear till later or something. It does make me wonder that, for example, this is one of the rare occasions the show goes 2 months later. I mean, it doesn't do that very often. But I know that at some point during this book, Bree got kidnapped by the Dread Pirate Bonnet, which they did last season. So I'm wondering if maybe that's when this happened, or something similar. If there's been some mini storyline or arc that's been moved, swapped, or completely cut out. Also, similarly, and possibly relatedly, during the scene when they were in the nasty house, Lizzie touched her face, which is a really bad idea, and they call her at Poo and Puke Palace. Also, straight after Claire goes...
It could be food poisoning. Or something worse. Don't touch your faces.
But it got me thinking, maybe that was also supposed to be the storyline, last week when she suddenly fainted. Maybe that was originally in the books, maybe that's actually connected, maybe not. I mean, maybe she just faints randomly in a different part of the story. But anyway, I mean, it seemed like an odd choice to have her specifically doing that, and then make absolutely nothing of it, and then have Claire be the one who's ill. I mean, not that that's not unlikely if she's been looking after people. I mean, you should watch The Painting of Vale. That's all about that. I mean, there's a whole big thing about people with cholera and nasty bloody flux in that film. It's actually pretty good. But anyway, there's a weird imbalance to things this week. And even just in the way that a lot of it was shot. I mean, look at shots like this. Like at the church, this was great. Or this was a really nice shot. But then compare that to stuff like this, which is just a bad shot. I mean, it's a really badly composed shot. I mean, most of it is just dead space. What's the point of it? I just don't like that kind of cinematography. It's not good. And I liked some of the other stuff, but I didn't like the dream sequence. I haven't liked any of the dream sequences this season. I quite like the beating heart thing. That was kind of fun in a sort of horror movie way. But yeah, the cloud and the snake and all this sort of weird footage that they're using that just looks like stock footage, because it probably is. Yeah, it has a sort of kids' TV show quality to it, and not really enjoying it. Also, on the basis of the dream thing, why is Claire putting stock in her dreams? I know that the old French warlock said something about that back ages ago in season 2, but you're supposed to be a woman of science. Anyway, you can tell that I had some issues with this week. So, overall, I actually quite enjoyed this episode. I mean, as I've said, most of my problems with it are kind of nitpicky, or they're more to do with the sort of broader concept of the show rather than the actual specifics of this episode. Also, moving forwards, I think this is a really bold step. And judging by the clip for next week on, and spoilers for anyone who doesn't watch it, but okay, I did this time, and it looks like this is going to turn into a bit of a whodunit, and that's great, because it also makes sense of why this story, they've made the point this week of separating the Fraser clan and co from the rest of the Ridge people and the Fisher folk, who I presume the Fisher folk are the people who came with Tom, and maybe I missed that in the line, but I've noticed people saying it a few times and mentioning them, but I've no idea who they are. But yeah, at present, there's quite a few folk who actually have motive to kill Malva. I mean, there's Jamie, obviously he has a motive, but let's be honest, he's not going to be the one who's done it. Claire, maybe in a drugged stupor, but seems unlikely. Ian, no, because he just slept with her once, it's not likely he'd have done it. There was this dude who was necking her in the church, maybe, just, or maybe, maybe one of the Weasley twins, unlikely. But yeah, because I also feel like the show hasn't really set up very many characters to be alternate people who have a good motive to kill her. And this may be because, I very recently watched Death on the Nile, and if you watch my movies by month videos, you'll see I did a review of that. So maybe I'm just too much in that mindset at the moment. But yeah, I would actually like this to be more of a big Agatha Christie style figuring out who did the bad deed. And at the moment, there's literally only really 2 people I reckon could have actually been the killer, and those are Tom and Alan Christie. Both as potentially murderers, but also both potentially as the dad of Malva's baby. Simply because, otherwise I don't even know why they're in the show. I mean, it's particularly Alan, I don't know why he's in the show, because he's done next to nothing since episode 1 where, he stole a powder thing and got everybody in trouble and got whipped. Because other than that, he's done nothing but turn up and being grumpy, shifty and cross. And I feel like he's the kind of character who, if he hasn't got a reason to be here, they would have cut him out. So yeah, he's not involved in any plot events, whereas Tom has actually been quite well established. He's really important to the plot, and he's also the one who's leathering his daughter's bare bum with a belt. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's doing the nasty on her. It might mean that he killed her, but to be honest, he's so pious and obsessive about it that I can't really see that being the case, which really only leaves Alan. And he does look like a shifty coke fiend. So, I mean, that's my guess straight out the gate. But hopefully I'm wrong, and there's actually going to be something more of it. And I really would like, God, it would be great if there was like a proper locked door mystery episode a la Knives Out or something for this. I'm also curious because I have noticed that, there was even more references this week to stuff from previous episodes. I mean, there was, in fact, literally, half the conversations in this episode were people talking about events from previous episodes. So the whole thing I was saying last week about this season's thing being looking back at the past, I think I might have been onto something there. So yeah, oh, by the way, please, if you have read the books, please don't put any specific spoilers down. There has been a little bit of that lately. I have to say this about once a season with it, every time I do a review of these shows. But I don't read the books, so if there is something major that you feel like putting in, err on the side of caution, because sometimes they have said they save some of the plot lines for later seasons, and I'd hate to think somebody gave away the ending of something that's big next season. But anyway, we'll see what happens, and yeah, till next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.